Pipeline tonight, episode 2. We got through the first episode. Chris McConn. I'm the host, at least for now, and just a dad and husband in Spring Branch. And we talked in episode 1 all about Pipeline, the origin story, all the different chapters of its history. It's now 4 years old. And a big part of that story, sort of the middle chapters, were the advocacy and the efforts with trustees and really transforming the school board at SBISD. And it was just natural to have episode 2 feature one of those trustees, and we are thrilled to have John and Colette Perez here. John Perez is the sitting trustee and the board member. Colette Perez is his energy and his brains. Is it fair to say that?
My oak. Yeah.
His oak. John's got a pretty good brain on him too.
His accountability, maybe.
Yes. But just to get that perspective, and it's important, right? John now has how many months on the board?
So we're coming up to close to 24 months, Chris.
Yes.
Right.
May
so 2022.
You got a good sample size of, things that you've seen and noticed and trends and things we still have to fight and things that represent victories. So we'll get into all that. But let's start with just introductions, and y'all just tell us about yourselves.
Sounds good. Ladies first. Go for it.
Okay. So Colette Perez, born and raised in Spring Branch, Meadowood Eagle, Westchester Junior High Wolverine, which no longer exists, and Stratford High School grad. And then I went from there to Texas A&M. I followed my 9 older siblings there. So yes, I'm the youngest of 10. We were all primarily educated in Spring Branch ISD, all Spring Branch ISD high school and middle school graduates. Some did elementary other places, but then we all went to A&M, got a phenomenal, great education there, where I got a degree in engineering, started my life in the plants, hands-on. I've always been a hands-on kind of person, where I met John. And then when we got engaged, we started looking at houses and immediately came right back to the old neighborhood, where I came home from the hospital in Nottingham. And
no, wait, hold on, Chris. Literally the old neighborhood across the street and 4 houses down. Yeah. I mean, I like to say everybody loves Raymond, but
hey, it was good value at the time.
Great. It was great. It's great.
I knew it was going to be a consistent place to raise a family, and that was definitely in our plans when we were engaged and getting married, is that we did want to raise a family and we did want to send them to public schools, and I knew that was the best place to go in the Houston area. And so then we had our 4 kids, and goes from there. Send them to school.
Good segue into me, right? So my story is a little bit different. Born in Carrizo Springs, which is Southwest Texas, probably the upper part of the valley, and I stayed there till about 4th grade. My dad saw some stuff on the horizon with respect to border wars with drugs and things like that. He had risen through the ranks of the school district and was principal, was working on grants for the district. But then he said, hey, I'm going to be mayor of Carrizo Springs. And then after that, I think is when he realized, hey, how do I get my family to that next, how do I transcend a bit, right? And so I still remember the day when he came back from wherever he was for 2 years doing training. And he goes, hey, we're moving to Jordan. I'm going, great. And I thought it was a small town and maybe 10 miles down the road, but no, it was like a totally different country, and it changed my life. It was great. So we moved to Jordan for a couple of years. Then I went to Guatemala as his next post was there. And then 4 years of high school in Costa Rica before coming here to go to university at Rice. Went there as an English major, graduated a chemical engineer, and down the road, was working at a plant. I saw Colette one day. I said, might have to, look into that a little bit. And, there's a story associated with how the whole courtship went. But, I did steal her from the clutches of a pro golfer, I will say.
I never knew that.
I know.
What's the name of the pro golfer? Is that allowed?
Jeff Maggart.
Jeff Maggart. Woodlands guy.
Yeah.
I'm a golfer. I absolutely know who Jeff Maggart is. Well,
yep. So
his loss is your gain.
I know. Tremendous gain. So it was great. Moving across the street, down the road from her parents was awesome. Especially with 4 kids, they came in handy. As you can imagine, growing up overseas, I really didn't make tons of connections with my extended family. So to have her being one of 10, and 29 nieces and nephews on that side, strong, Christian conservative family. It's been great. I mean, I really enjoyed it. So obviously I didn't grow up in Spring Branch, but once I got here, I realized this is certainly home. It is home now. And when I look at everything we've done, not just with our professional lives and our personal lives and our lives of service, a lot of it revolves around that community. And I think what you might hear from us throughout, hopefully this talk, is we're always hopefully trying to look for ways where we can serve beyond ourselves, and I think that's what I like about Spring Branch, because there's so many people like that.
Palpable sense of community. Y'all are far from the first people to boomerang back and come home. I mean, right. That's a big part of the Spring Branch story, is just how attractive it is to live there and raise a family there and know that people have your back and that there are shared values. And a lot of it is old-fashioned in a good way. It's the things that you're reading in the newspaper and in books about. We seem to have lost it in the American fabric. Well, that still is very alive and well in Spring Branch. And so, we talked last episode about that's one of the big reasons Pipeline formed. So anyway, thanks for the introductions. And I guess the best next place to go is tell me kind of why run for school board, and you probably have to back up, maybe a few steps before like the actual campaign, things that formed you, things that you saw, things that maybe you realize now were seeds that were planted, even if you didn't know it back then, that then all kind of led up to you saying, this is something that I should probably do.
No, sure. I'll start. And then if you want to pepper in some comments and commentary, just jump right in.
Sure. I will interrupt.
So one thing I did, I think, get from an early age, I always saw my parents give a lot of themselves. I saw my dad certainly devote himself to a life of service, public service, first as, working in the schools, but then also choosing to become mayor of a small town. Sure, it's not a metropolis like Houston, but it's still a community. And so he stepped out and chose to be that public servant, and then went even further with, okay, well, how do I, again, kind of drive my family to a different station in life? And he chose the diplomatic corps, right? The Foreign Service, State Department. And so I'm not going to say it's in my DNA, but I certainly viewed and observed it. And I think it certainly left an impression on me and gave me this sense of duty. And that's what I like to tell folks. I teach a class at Rice, and oftentimes, the conversation always boils down to, hey, you know who you are, but then at the same time, it's a lot about your culture that drives, your behaviors and your outcomes. And he just built a sense of culture in our family of duty. And I think that's a lot of what drove me at the end of the day when COVID hit. I'd already been involved with rodeo, and, I was scoutmaster of our Boy Scout troop. So I was always looking for those ways to serve. But when COVID hit, a lot of folks woke up. And I think you hear that a lot. But what I like to reflect on, and I'm not sure a lot of folks have heard this from me, so something a little bit new, is one of my neighbors was one of the first ladies who said, hey, there's this group of ladies, and they're trying to get our kids back to school. And I said, sounds great. But I also sit there and go, okay, a group of ladies passionate about something, happens a lot in our neighborhood, might be the flavor of the day. Well, weeks, months, and you realize, this group has legs, this group has passion, this group is community, this group is not just ladies, it's parents, right? And
we didn't get to it in the last episode talking about Pipeline and its formation, but I'm glad you said in your anecdote that the person, your neighbor, called it a group of ladies, because that's almost literally what it was. And I was one of I wasn't an original, but I got there pretty early just to be involved, and I was attracted to it. But were there 4 guys in there, 3? Tom Stokes and a couple others. So the dads were absent, and, maybe topic for later on or another show. We need to get more dads involved. But, sure. Anyway, so you heard about Pipeline.
So we heard about Pipeline, and what I started seeing and realizing is they were doing what we were doing with our company, right? COVID hit, the knee-jerk reaction is, man, we're shutting everything down. We felt compelled to say, okay, well, if our employees are a little bit worried, let's shut down after spring break like everyone else did. that lasted about 2 days for us.
Mm-hmm.
And then basically the Alamo, for us, we started calling our office the Alamo because I came back, then another employee came back, and we just never shut down after that.
Mm-hmm.
And so the struggle that I saw Pipeline in the community taking on of getting our kids back to in-person education because they knew it was just the right thing to do. And they also saw an infringement on our civil liberty.
Mm-hmm.
It was the same thing we were doing with our company.
Mm-hmm.
And, Colette was there with me. Our employees were there with us. And it was certainly a struggle. But at the same time, I saw camaraderie build and I saw the community react the same way to this effort. And for me, it was a matter of, okay, well, I see the board. I see how they're behaving. And they're certainly an old guard. I just felt it was time for some folks that had that courageous conviction, because what I was observing and learning was that courageous conviction is contagious. And to me, that was probably really the crux of, hey, what are you going to do about this? Right. And my daughter challenged me one day. It's like, hey, you're doing a lot of complaining. Right. It's like, yeah, you're right. And we do hard things, and we only come with the complaints if we have solutions, is what we say in our house. So that was a gut punch. And I said, you know what? I really got to look into running for board and serving my community in a different capacity. And what I'll end and, give Colette some time here is I have the bandwidth right now. Right. I think what I realized is I could certainly be doing plenty of things with my time that I enjoy. I love duck hunting. I love playing golf. But there's a period in time right now where I can serve this way and serve in this capacity. And I feel it's my duty.
Colette, were you kind of unsure at first, or were you prodding him saying you need to run for school board, or telling your daughter?
Probably neither, Chris. I had a number of people approach me. So John and I were, as he said, we both were raised by parents that were very much service givers.
Mm-hmm.
And so it was kind of the norm that you always gave back to your community, whether it's your church, whether it's your neighborhood, whether it's your swim team, whether it's your school. It's just part of what you do. Like my mom sewed costumes. My dad built props. I mean, it was what our lives were made up. And so we'd always kind of been involved at our little level, whether it was me teaching a Sunday school class, or John doing scouts, or me doing Cub Scouts in elementary, coaching. We'd kind of always been involved, but we've never been, and it was never our style to be the headliner, right? Mm-hmm. I've always been, and he'll tell you, I am the rubber meets the road. Like I am let me put my hands on the kid and make sure that they have their needs met. Mm-hmm. When it comes to things like that. And so I think we got approached by a number of the Pipeline ladies saying, hey, would John have any interest? And we went, well, I guess we can think about that. And before he actually made that decision, he met with teachers individually. He met with administrators individually and kind of said, hey, give me your viewpoint of what's going on at this school. Give me your viewpoint of what's going on in your challenges in your classroom, versus just the upper echelon of the vibe in the neighborhood of what's occurring. And so he kind of did a lot of research on it and said, you know what, I think this is what God has laid out for me right now. And I'm in a great spot where I can take that chance, and I see a place that I can hopefully make a difference for the students and the teachers. And so it kind of rolled out from there.
Yeah.
Now, one thing I'll throw out there too, though, Chris, is I wasn't that education insider. And what I do recognize now is sometimes that can be perceived as a threat to the system. And I think what I'd like to share with folks is we can't underestimate the power of fear and uncertainty and doubt when you see these different catalysts pop up, and they're perceived not so much as, hey, is this person coming to help me, or is this person coming to rock the boat and I'm going to fall out of it? And one thing I was keen on trying to make sure that we provided assurance as we got into the campaign is just making folks understand, hey, listen, this is our boat too, right? We're not looking to rock anyone out of it. And even today, when I look at the landscape, I sit there and go, okay, we're in this together.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at the end of the day, we're all going to still be here. Mm-hmm. And trying to figure out how to advance and improve, right? So just like pipelines switched from in-person once their goal was achieved, they pivoted to, well, now we want to just improve public education, right? And I think that's kind of important too, is there's always the impetus that gets a ball rolling, but then once it's in motion, okay, sometimes the engine just needs to be modified every now and then.
Yeah. And, we've had to pivot as a group as issues arise real time, as even, you think you've made some gains and then there's some rollbacks. And you also have this dynamic of the school board being people who are going to come and go, right? And maybe it's one term, maybe it's 2 terms, maybe it's several terms, but they're temporary. And, just like you see in at any level of politics, you have the bureaucrats who can wait it out, right? And so anyway, I'm sure you've seen some of that. I'm sure you went into it with hopes to affect this here or affect that there, and have had to realize that it's sometimes just a tougher road to hoe, but perseverance and all that stuff. So maybe talk a little bit about now 2 years in, the issues that are animating you today, like the things that you want to try your best to get done before you step aside or go do something else, or when your time is done.
Sure. I'm actually very happy with what we've achieved to date.
Yeah.
And it may not always be visible because folks don't go out there and read the policy. Maybe they're not seeing the changes in culture or seeing the community having a little bit more courage and calling, because when they call, someone answers now, and someone goes to the district and holds them accountable and drives change. So just seeing that to me is very encouraging. And I feel once again, you have that courageous conviction, and it's becoming contagious. For me, that was a lot of what I wanted to achieve. Just be that catalyst for change. Sometimes folks like to label me as a disruptor. I'm not a huge fan of that label, but at the same time, I can see where a paradigm shift is always going to be viewed as a little bit of a disruption, right? I mean, it's people like smooth, but sometimes smooth gets complacent.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I think what you're asking is what's animating me. I worry about funding.
Yep.
Funding is the primary reason for me choosing to be a legislative liaison, getting involved with getting our priorities written, advocating on behalf of the district. Something I do like to remind folks every now and then is there were 2 folks that probably spent more time at the Capitol advocating on behalf of our district for public funding than anyone else, and that was myself and Matt Cohn. So funding has always been something that's important to me, and it's still probably the issue that animates me more than anything, because it's hard to do anything without adequate funding. And it's certainly a fight, and that landscape is so nuanced, and I think it's hard for folks to really get their arms around it in a 5-minute conversation.
Yeah. Oh boy, 5-minute conversations are, it seems like, what we've devolved to. It's all we can consume, and it's the format of YouTube, and we're probably going to cut pieces of this show up and have it 30-second bite size on Instagram. But you can't even scratch the surface of a subject like school choice, which we will save for another show. It's coming up, and how incredibly intricate that whole thing is, and how there are good arguments on both sides, and the devil's in the details of how you roll it out. And so I just think leaders who are willing to invest the time and then tell the constituents, implore them, hear the whole story, look at it. And let's not reduce it to sound bites or what you think you probably should support because of the art sign you have, or the R or the D, or whatever it is. Anyway, other issues related to funding. I guess the other thing I wanted to ask you is, you went to and from Austin a lot, okay? And you and we're both Catholics, right? So the principle of subsidiarity, we've had this conversation before about, the idea that anything that needs to be done, it's best to do it at the most local level. So the teacher of the Memorial High School class knows her students a lot better than the head of the English department knows her particular students. But the head of the English department knows them better than the principal does, and the principal knows them better than you do, and you know them better than a TEA person does, who knows them better than the federal Department of Education. And so that to me is something that I really kind of leaned into when we started in Pipeline, like getting aggressive on, okay, let's get the people who know our kids and know our community. Let's focus our efforts there instead of state races or federal races. So maybe talk a little bit about, maybe you have a story or two, where subsidiarity kind of comes to life, where it's like you've seen that kid in that classroom and you can go do something in your trustee role and make that kid's life better, or, make bad things go away.
Sure.
I can talk about one.
Yeah.
That, was eye-opening to me. So we have a friend who moved from Katy ISD to Spring Branch ISD in fall of 2021.
Mm-hmm.
And so COVID had occurred. No, maybe it was after 2022. But she got hired at second grade level. And, midway through the year, I said, hey, how are you liking Spring Branch? How's your class? And she goes, telling you, it's a very big challenge. And I said, well, you've taught for like 8, 9, 10 years. What's different? Like, give us some input. What's different? And she said, and I never thought about this until she said it. She said, I have second graders that have never been in school. And I said, what do you mean by that? And she said, well, they got a half a year of kindergarten and then we sent them home. And then the next year, a lot of them could opt to still be virtual and stay at home, and they did. And now I have them in second grade. And she said, so I literally have kids that are supposed to be reading at this set level per the state and our district guidelines, but I'm still focused on ABCs and what sound a letter makes. And that's where you go, wow, a teacher really understood the dynamics of what's going on at her level way better than our legislators did, and how they could support the second graders across the whole entire state that were probably in the same challenges, Chris.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where I expand on that to where.
Yeah, I think there are different stories across the last 2 or 3 years. But even as a trustee, when I visited schools and we were getting tours at elementary level with dual language programs or students that were being taught in Spanish, and when I query the teachers or the principal who was on the tour, I said, so I'm just curious. They're getting instruction in both English and Spanish. Does it delay their time to full proficiency in English? And through my discovery of having these conversations, what I've learned is, and I had to reach out to folks down in the Valley who are experts on this because they have a lot more experience with students coming over that their primary language has been Spanish, for example. And they said, hey, John, the research is there that if someone is not proficient in English by second grade, they have to go to immersion. And so when you see that a body of knowledge drives a certain right way to do things, but the system isn't necessarily designed to support that right way because our funding mechanism doesn't support us moving someone out of a dual language program because we get more money for someone in a dual language program. That's what drives me to go, how do I change that? Okay. Because our focus should be on the student outcome. How do we make this student as successful as possible beyond our halls? We're not doing it, but we're not doing it not because we're evil or bad, because our funding mechanism is driving the wrong behavior. So when you ask, why do all roads go back to funding in my mind, it's because the way we have set up our funding mechanism with the basic allotment and the weights and what we get money for, our system's just going to try to game the system to get as much money as possible, and it starts driving interesting behaviors. And what I worry about is you talk about the local level. We know it, we see it, right? Our teachers know it, our principals know it. Yes, we have layers between them all, between them and the superintendent, but they know it. When you start looking at funding mechanisms changing that take the local revenue collection away from local authority, you then worry about, well, what else starts slowly moving away from local authority? And before you know it, you get this mindset of it's not even ours.
Right. Goes against the principle of subsidiarity if my, tax doesn't even go to my schools. And, y'all have been through Robin Hood and recapture and come and take it. And
right.
We can go through that. That's been pretty well publicized. Colette, do you ever, John comes home from a board of trustees meeting and kind of say, look, from where I sit, this is what should be happening. And and no, I just am curious about that because, I have been at the head of committees like at church, St. Vincent de Paul Society, right? It's just basically giving to the poor. It's the black bag. And how are we going to give that? No overhead. What you put in there goes to, there's politics even in that I have to kind of cut through, and you can get sort of infected with committeeism a lot of times. So I know it happens on the school board, even though I haven't been privy to it. But I'm just curious, like how much of that kind of when it comes home, is it like, well, you'll understand because this is what I'm dealing with. And you're like, well, it just seems like this is what you should do and just push that aside. And if there's any kind of give and take there where you benefit from her perspective and all
Absolutely,
that.
I don't know
100%.
if he benefits, but I give it probably on a hourly basis for sure. Not a daily. I think I went into him today and I said, I know I have more questions.
Yeah.
And I know I'm your wife. But if you can't answer them, do I email another trustee? And he's like, no. Let me see. Where are your questions? What are your challenges? And even,
what I love is she won't even hesitate to put in a public information request.
Yeah.
I won't.
Okay.
If I have a
give me a chance to try to get the information.
Right? I was raised to ask all the questions you can and dig as deep as you can to find the answers and the solutions to make everything better. And as I tell him on a regular basis, for me in any school, but especially in our public school systems and every classroom and every teacher, I see our goal is to maximize the potential of every child in that classroom. Mm-hmm. Every child, we have 4 kids. They all have a different level of maximum. They all have a different level that they can achieve, whether it be in a sport or scholastic in a class or creativity. But it's our job as a community and as these teachers and our district to make sure every child, it doesn't matter to me whether it's a special ed child or your valedictorian National Merit Scholar, that they get the absolute max education for that child in our district. And I don't know that I see that focus as much anymore on what can we do to maximize the learning of every child.
Yeah, that was kind of going to be my next question is besides the obvious jolt that COVID represented, are there other just kind of macro culture things that are headwinds maybe causing what Colette is talking about? We talked about in the last episode screens and, all the tech, and some of it can be helpful, but a lot of it can be harmful. And so, I don't know, just thoughts on that.
Yeah, so I could probably talk about several things here. But if you're going to ask me to say if I were to pick my top 3, the one that's coming to mind right now, because I've been looking into it quite a bit, just research-wise, because I think it's a fight coming even on the school choice front, is how we discipline in schools. And what I've seen across even just the last 2 years as a trustee, some of our struggles and some of our battles as a board, but even when I communicate with my wife about, hey, how should something be handled? Our teachers just don't have control of their classrooms. I'm not even sure our principals, are completely autonomous in the sense of I can control my school. There are rules they have to follow. There's legislation that's been passed. And when you look at I don't want to get into the school choice battle too much, but I can see where there's going to be this critical issue about, well, I want to go to a school where my kid is going to be in a classroom that is focused on learning, because it goes back to how do we focus on learning? Well, you got to remove distractions.
Boy, my wife was a Pershing middle school teacher when we were dating. And I remember her calling me after one day at school and saying, and for some reason we were talking about funding even back then. I think it was Bush, it was president, and he just signed a big bill to put a lot of money in education. And she said, I just saw something today that no amount of money will ever fix. And that is, I had 5 kids in my class just come in, put their heads down on the desk, and were catatonic. They were not going to be reached with one word of what I said. And I know those kids' home situations, and they don't have parents they have one parent, and that parent's working and won't see him today very much. And so it was she just went off for 30 minutes about how do you even start to move the needle there. And boy, that's not something that 7 trustees can maybe even put a dent in. So I mean, but yeah,
it's hard. But at the same time, there is advocacy that can be done by the trustees, and I think that's one. When you look at the legislative priorities that get written this year, going into the 89th, I think that's an issue that's going to be coming to a point because it's going to have to be tackled as part of the school choice conversation. But when I say distractions, I mean, yeah, pick your screens. I mean, I think one of the more successful policies that we've enjoyed is we said, hey, we're done with screens in our elementary schools and middle schools. And, kids are putting them away. We had great feedback from the teachers and the principals, even from parents. For the most part, the feedback was very positive. The focus going back to the, instructional time and the student outcomes was very positive. So just technology, discipline, issues. But then you get down to, okay, the demands we place on our teachers with activities that aren't focused on instruction, right? And this is another part where you sit there and go, how can the legislators really come into play? I mean, we spend a lot of money and a lot of time focused on the STAR test. And everyone I talk to says the STAR test is junk, right? I think it's junk. We've always paid more attention to the MAP outcomes and information that we get from the MAP assessments. So if we know that STAR is junk and we spend all this money and we waste all this time on it, just think about what we could have back and what our kids could be spending their time on if we weren't wasting our teachers' time and our schools' time and our resources' time on something that we think is just junk. Mm-hmm. And to me, that's so frustrating because, again, it's part of this big ship mentality of we're not agile enough to change very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And so when you get, I think what happens sometimes when you get entrepreneurs that are used to being more of a speedboat versus a liner, they get frustrated. And I've had my shares of frustrations, and I can see where other folks like me might have that. But at the same time, what they do bring is, hey, we can do it differently, right? We can disrupt the system a little and just tweak.
Yeah.
Right? And before you know it, that course has shifted and we've righted a little, and we're getting better outcomes.
Oh, that's good. What else, Colette? What's anything else keeping you up at night, like in terms of just headwinds facing the district, or good things that are inspiring you, just what you're seeing from student outcomes, opportunities for the students, anything?
Chris, I think, like I said, I mentor through the Springboard program in Spring Branch, and I work with the FFA kids over at Guthrie. And so I see a different viewpoint than just my neighborhood and where my kids are friends. There's a lot of amazing, wonderful, driven kids throughout our entire district that may not have food at home, but they still show up for school every day.
Mm-hmm.
May not know how they're going to pay for that graduate school, or when I say graduate school, post-grad, whether it be going to HCC or going to a 4-year school. But they still show up every day, and a lot of them, I would say the majority of them, are doing the work to try to put themselves on a path, and that is true hope. It's just making sure that we, as the leaders and the administrators and the teachers, are doing everything we can to keep supporting them. Right?
Absolutely.
Because there's a lot of them that have a lot of challenges that, unless you're out there and you're with those kids, we don't even understand. Both social challenges because of FaceTime, emotional issues because of what may or may not be occurring at home, financial issues. And they're still showing up every day to give their best. And we have to make sure we're supporting them.
I think your point of getting out of the bubble and going to see the people, right? Going to talk to the principal, going to talk to the students. I'd love to do one of these episodes of just let's find a shining star or two, points of light. I mean, there's millions out there in SBISD, and just let them tell their stories and hear it from the students that we just, talk about wanting to support and grow. But so maybe you can talk a little bit about, John, like the importance of that, just and your ability to do it.
Yeah. So what I'll throw on and add there, Chris, is it makes a big difference when I come home. You were talking about, kind of the board pillow talk, so to speak, right? Not only is it important for me to come home and she says, hey, I saw how you reacted, or I listened to that, because they're all live streamed now, which is great. But she goes, she'll tell me, I think you need to take a step back and, think about that a little differently. Or she might be a little bit more forceful and said, hey, we're really missing the mark there.
Yeah.
Right? And I have to take it all. But on top of that, it's a data point, and she's speaking from experience from our girls coming home, from the FFA barn, from Guthrie, from Spartanaires, from Stratford. At one point we had, 4 kids in the district, so we were getting data points from a lot of places. What I like about, for example, Pipeline and any community player, what I do try to pay attention to is, are they walking the talk? Because I think it's important that you get out of the bubble, that you go and you volunteer, that you go and you serve, that you are where the rubber meets the road. For me, a conversation with a teacher is just as important, if not more important, than a conversation with, Dr. Blaine. And I'm not dismissing Dr. Blaine by no means. I'm just saying the teachers know what's going on. Us supporting the teachers is extremely important. The teacher shortage right now that we have in the nation, especially here in Texas, is very real. And so anything we can do as a community with this feedback, paying attention to, the student outcomes, anything we can do to support our teachers is really becoming mission critical. And what I'd like, just kind of getting that positivity out there, because I think we can't lose sight of it, is our community is pretty awesome when it comes to that. I know that we're all very passionate about supporting our teachers. We don't want to lose our good teachers. Where we are very focused on trying to, I think, get beyond just our school and looking to our sister schools. But I can't help but feel at times we have to do more.
Yeah.
We just simply have to do more.
I just think that, and we talked about it last episode, that, Pipeline can stray into some lateral energy and some noise and what's good for me and some ego stuff and some politics. But overall, I've been very impressed as to the way that they do keep it, like they can rein it back in and say, okay, is this good for kids or is it not? And that's the North Star. And let's just go pursue it if it's good. And if it's not, what are we doing? So anyway, that's, I think, the spirit of the group and
And you have offshoots, right? So, one of the big issues that was facing our district is literacy curriculum. How we teach kids how to read, right? The whole Sold the Story from Emily Hanford came out, and, it sparked this debate, and then it sparked this movement. And at some point, districts around the nation are trying to figure out, well, what do we do with this? And I think we were fortunate enough to have leadership that, albeit, it took some time. They worked with the community, and from Pipeline, you had a couple of folks really jump out and say, hey, we're going to start wrangling this in.
Yes.
Maybe it's not everything Pipeline's going to tackle, but we certainly have this group that's passionate about literacy. And, I was pretty involved. I know Lisa Alpe was involved, and it became very important because you recognize, hey, something isn't right here, right? And that is something I'm pretty proud of, is just getting to the point where we have that literacy curriculum assessment team. We're now getting involved with Texas Reads. But again, while not Pipeline proper, it's that offshoot, it's that passion, it's that grassroots activism. And to me, that's pretty important. And you have to maintain it. You have to sustain it. So I'm excited about the future of SBISD. I'm excited about the future of Pipeline. I'm excited about our future here in the district. But at the same time, it's a muscle. You got to work the muscle. Right?
Yeah.
We have 20 nieces and nephews that have gone through SBISD, and then we have, 10 or 15 grand nieces and nephews that are zoned and moving up the ranks from pre-K to third now.
That's family.
And littler, and north side, south side, west side, east side of the district, kind of all over. And so it is. It's where our family came back because we love it and we promote it. When people ask at work, hey, where do we put our kids in school? John and I both say, well, if you can find a house in Spring Branch available, that's where you want to be.
Well, I know I speak on behalf of all of Pipeline when I say that we thank you for your selflessness and your service and your willingness to step into a job that oftentimes is thankless and certainly has a lot of, or can have a lot of mud slinging around and just some unsavory stuff. And it's a, time commitment, probably bigger than you thought.
A little bit.
President Ernest said it the other day. I think it was a candidate forum saying, to get ready, you guys who are running, because it's more than you think. It's a lot of time. And we all have got our sports and our church and our full-time jobs and all that stuff. But it occurs to me that, to the people watching, we welcome your thoughts on just things that you'd like to see us address. And I think the best way maybe to send feedback is to go to Pipeline's website, just search Pipeline on Google, and there's a blog in there, I think a section where you can submit comments. And that's probably the best way for us to just compile those. And if we see some recurring themes, we can try to get people who know something about it. I'll just try to facilitate the conversation. And I hope I facilitated a good one today. I certainly enjoyed it. I learned some new things, even though I feel like I know you guys, and keep doing what you're doing.
It's always great talking to you, Chris. I mean, it's always great talking to you.
Well, thanks, and we will see you for the next episode, and that's it. Thanks for watching Pipeline tonight.